All right, so we've got some pretty fascinating sources to unpack today.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to be diving deep into, well, the whole world of attracting younger women. At least that's what the sources seem to focus on.
It at first glance, it might seem like that's all there is to it, but flipping through these sources, I gotta say, it's like they accidentally stumbled onto some universal truths about confidence and connection,
Hmm.
stuff that could benefit anyone, honestly, not just folks interested in dating younger women.
Yeah, it's interesting how these sources, even though they're aimed at a specific niche, they really do offer a blueprint for, well, for building stronger relationships across the board, really.
Exactly. Like one of the things that really jumped out at me was this idea that, confidence, it's not just about attracting a certain type of person, it's about communicating your worth in any social situation.
And what's cool is that the source emphasizes that true confidence, it isn't about bragging or trying to be the loudest person in the room. It's more about, well, it's more about that quiet self-assuredness that comes from knowing yourself and being comfortable in your own skin, you know?
Like, remember that anecdote from the source about handling a date night mishap with grace? It's not about avoiding problems altogether. It's more about showing you can adapt and problem solve when things inevitably go sideways.
Yeah, and that kind of resilience, it's definitely attractive in any context.
Totally. Because it speaks to a certain level of maturity,
Yeah.
right? Like you can handle whatever life throws at you.
Exactly. And that makes people want to be around you more regardless of, age or the type of relationship.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's not just about projecting confidence outwardly. It's also about, well, the source calls it emotional intelligence. And it seems like a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah. Emotional intelligence is huge in any relationship. It's that ability to not only understand your own emotions, but also to, like, read the emotions of others and respond in a way that builds trust and connection.
And the source gave this really practical example about active listening. Like when you ask those follow-up questions after someone shares a problem, it makes them feel truly heard.
It's that feeling of being understood that really lays the foundation for a strong relationship.
It's like you're giving them the space to be vulnerable, which allows for a deeper connection.
Definitely. And speaking of connection, the source also dives into this idea of going beyond superficial small talk to build, well, to build genuine rapport.
And it's not just about exchanging pleasantries, right? It's about engaging with the other person on a deeper level.
Right, like finding that common ground, exploring each other's interests, and connecting through shared humor.
I love how the source highlights the power of shared humor.
It's like this universal language that can bridge any gap, you know? Like a well-placed joke or a shared moment of laughter can instantly create a sense of camaraderie.
It's those little things that solidify a connection, make it memorable.
Absolutely. And this is where things got really interesting for me because the source brought up this whole concept of leadership, but not in the way you'd typically think.
Yeah, it wasn't about taking charge or being dominant. It was more about inspiring confidence in others.
Right. And the source makes a clear distinction. True leadership isn't about controlling others, it's about benity. It's about taking initiative, making decisions confidently, and guiding interactions with a sense of purpose, all while respecting the other person.
Like that example about taking the lead when planning a date. It's not about dictating every detail. It's more about showcasing decisiveness without being controlling,
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between leading with confidence and being considerate of the other person's preferences.
which is valuable in any relationship, really.
Oh, absolutely, whether it's
Hmm.
at work, with friends, or even in family dynamics.
So this deep dive's already making me rethink how I approach interactions, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it's not just about inner qualities, right? The source also brought up the importance of presentation, which I have to admit I was a little hesitant about at first.
Yeah, I get that. The word presentation can sometimes feel superficial, but the source takes a different angle. It argues that taking care of your physical well-being and presenting yourself well is really about self-respect, you know?
It's that whole package idea, right?
Yeah.
And the source specifically highlighted fitness and health, but not in a way that felt focused on achieving some unrealistic ideal. It was more about finding activities that boost your energy and confidence.
Right, like walking, swimming, yoga, anything that makes you feel good from the inside out.
Exactly. And when you prioritize your well-being, you naturally project a more positive and attractive vibe.
It's like you radiate this inner confidence that comes from taking care of yourself. Yep.
And you know what else caught my eye? The source's emphasis on the power of storytelling. At first, I was like, storytelling, what's that got to do with confidence and connection? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how powerful a tool it can be.
Storytelling's a fundamental part of being human. It's how we share our experiences, make ourselves relatable, and connect with others on a deeper level.
Like, remember that example about describing a trip to Italy?
Oh yeah, instead of just saying, I went to Italy, the source encouraged painting a picture with sensory details.
Right.
Like the smell of fresh pasta, the sound of church bells, the warmth of the sun.
It's about engaging the other person's imagination, making them feel like they're experiencing those moments with you.
Which is a powerful way to build rapport.
It's about transforming everyday experiences into captivating narratives.
And speaking of captivating, the source also didn't shy away from the topic of touch, which, I'll admit, made me a bit nervous at first.
Yeah, touch can be a powerful form of nonverbal communication, but it's definitely a topic that requires sensitivity and awareness.
For sure, and the source emphasizes that any touch has to be appropriate and consensual. It's about respect and boundaries.
Absolutely. Starting with small platonic gestures like a pat on the back or a light touch in the arm.
And only progressing if it feels natural and welcome.
It's like you're navigating this dance of building trust and rapport through physical cues.
Exactly. Now, one thing that really stuck with me, especially considering the source material's focus, was the emphasis on cultural awareness.
Yeah, and I think this is something we often overlook, especially in today's world.
Especially when trying to connect with people from different backgrounds or generations.
It's not about trying to change who you are, but about showing genuine interest and being open to learning from each other.
Like that example about taking the time to learn about a younger person's favorite show or social media trend.
It shows you're making an effort to connect with their world.
And those small acts of curiosity can go a long way.
Absolutely. But perhaps the most important takeaway from the source, and one that really resonated with me, is the power of patience.
Yeah, patience is huge, and it's something we often overlook in our fast-paced world.
The source really stresses that rushing things can backfire, especially when you're trying to form genuine bonds.
Building trust takes time, you can't force it.
And it's about respecting the other person's pace.
Exactly, and showing that you're genuinely interested in building something meaningful over time.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. It's amazing how these principles, even though they were presented in a specific context, really have such broad applications.
It highlights how the desire to connect on a deeper level is a universal human experience,
And you know what? We've only just scratched the surface. I'm really excited to dive even deeper in the next part of our discussion.
So much to explore, right? This source material, it's really got me thinking.
Yeah, and one of the things that really stuck with me was that whole leading with grace idea.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It ties back to what we were saying about leadership, but adds this whole other dimension.
It's not just about being decisive. It's about being considerate, actually graceful about it.
Exactly. Like true leadership, it comes from a place of respect, empathy. It's about guiding things in a way that benefits everyone, makes people feel comfortable and valued.
Right, not pressured or like you're trying to take over.
Exactly. It's finding that sweet spot between taking the lead and being sensitive to the other person's needs.
It makes you think how that applies to so many areas of life.
For sure. Like, think about it in the workplace. A leader who has that kind of grace, they can really inspire their team.
It makes total sense. And, it's not just about how we interact with others, but also how we present ourselves. We talked about presentation earlier in the context of physical well-being, but the source goes deeper.
Yeah, it's about the whole package. How you carry yourself, your style, your energy.
Aligning your outer presentation with your inner confidence kind of thing.
Exactly, and finding a style that feels authentic to you. It's not about conforming to some standard. It's about expressing your individuality in a way that makes you feel good.
I love that. Celebrating your unique qualities. And, when I think back to times I felt my best, it's always when I'm wearing something that makes me feel both comfortable and confident.
Oh, absolutely. It radiates outward, for sure.
Big time. And it reminds me of another point the source made about the power of storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah.
At first, I wasn't sure how it fit in, but the more we talk about it, the more I realize sharing our stories, it's such a fundamental part of how we connect as humans.
Think about it. Stories. They're how we make sense of the world, how we connect with others, how we share our experiences.
Like that example from the source about describing a trip to Italy.
Yeah, instead of just saying, I went to Italy, it was about bringing that experience to life.
The smells, the sounds, like you were right there with them.
Exactly. Painting a picture with words.
Creating a shared experience, even if the listener's never been to Italy.
And suddenly you're connected through that shared narrative.
Powerful stuff. And it kind of brings us back to the topic of touch, which I know we mentioned before, but it's such a fascinating and complex part of communication.
Oh, for sure. Touch, it can convey so much warmth, empathy.
But it needs to be done with sensitivity and awareness.
Yeah. Absolutely. The source really emphasized starting small, like a brief touch on the arm, a pat on the back.
Reading those subtle cues
Yeah.
and only going further if it feels right.
It's like a dance, you
Yeah.
know, constantly reading the situation, adjusting based on the other person's cues.
Building trust gradually through those small interactions.
And it applies to all sorts of relationships, not just romantic ones.
Right. A well-timed touch can mean a lot in any setting.
Totally. And it's amazing how much we communicate without even saying a word, but verbal communication, it's still crucial, especially when it comes to understanding cultural differences.
Which was a key point of the source material, something I think we all struggle with from time to time.
Especially these days, with so much diversity. It's about being open-minded, willing to learn.
Recognizing that different backgrounds, different generations, they bring different perspectives.
And it's not about erasing those differences. It's about embracing them, seeing them as opportunities to grow.
That example about learning about a younger person's favorite show or what's trending on social media.
It might seem small, but it shows you're making an effort.
Building those bridges.
Exactly. And all of this, it brings us back to the importance of patience, which keeps coming up.
In our fast-paced world, it's easy to forget. But connection, it takes time.
It does. It's like nurturing a plant. It needs time to grow, to develop strong roots.
And rushing things can actually backfire, especially when you're trying to build something real, something lasting.
Patience is about respecting the other person's pace, trusting the process.
That plant analogy, I love that. It's a good reminder that relationships, they need that time and care to thrive.
And speaking of thriving, the source also talked about bridging generational gaps, which is something I'm really passionate about.
It's so important these days, finding ways to connect across those divides.
Each generation, it brings something unique to the table, and it's through those differences that we can learn from each other.
And it's about approaching those interactions with humility. Not assuming we have all the answers.
That example about taking the time to learn about a younger person's interests, it shows you're willing to step outside your comfort zone.
It's about those bridges again.
Exactly. Building connections where everyone feels valued, no matter their age or background.
And, thinking about everything we've discussed, it all seems to come back to respect.
Respect, absolutely. For ourselves, for others, for the process of building these connections.
It's the foundation of any strong relationship.
Without it, you're building on shaky ground.
Valuing the other person, appreciating their uniqueness, treating them with kindness.
Creating a space where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
And isn't that what it's all about? Creating connections where we can truly be ourselves.
Absolutely. Where we feel seen, heard, valued.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. I'm already seeing how these principles apply to my own life.
Me too. It's amazing how these simple concepts can have such a profound impact.
And we've only just scratched the surface. I can't wait to see what else we discover in the rest of the source material.
There's definitely more to dig into. And, one thing that keeps coming up for me is this idea of really fostering those genuine connections, going beyond just, surface level stuff.
It's like these sources are saying, hey, look past the superficial and you'll find something much deeper.
Exactly, like recognizing that true connection, it comes from shared values, respect, a real desire to get to know the other person, not just what's on the outside.
Right, it's about seeing the person for who they really are.
And approaching the whole thing with curiosity, not judgment.
Makes you think about that point the source made, about simply making someone feel seen and heard.
Oh, yeah, just that feeling of being understood, it can be so powerful.
Absolutely, it's like you're giving them permission to be themselves, to open up without worrying about being judged.
And that kind of acceptance, it can be huge.
It creates a sense of belonging, of connection, which I think we all crave deep down.
Absolutely. And speaking of connection, the source also talked about physical touch, but in a way that was really insightful.
Yeah, it was a delicate topic, but they handled it with a lot of care.
It's about recognizing that touch can be powerful, but it always has to be respectful,
Definitely. Starting with those small gestures, a touch on the arm, and being aware of how the other person responds.
It's like this unspoken language where each touch has its own meaning.
It's about building trust gradually through those little interactions.
And that applies to any relationship, not just romantic ones.
For sure. It's about conveying warmth and support in a way that feels natural.
Exactly. Which brings us back to patience, something that's been a recurring theme in our conversation.
And I think that speaks volumes about how important it is, especially when it comes to building relationships.
In a world that's constantly rushing us, it's easy to forget that some things just take time.
The source made a great point about how rushing things, especially in relationships, can actually do more harm than good.
It's like trying to force a flower to bloom before it's ready.
It needs that time to grow, to develop at its own pace.
Exactly. Patience is about respecting that natural rhythm, trusting the process.
That whole flower analogy, it's such a good reminder that relationships, they need that time and care to really flourish.
And speaking of flourishing, something else that stood out to me was the source's emphasis on bridging those generational gaps.
It's so crucial these days, finding ways to connect across those divides.
Because each generation brings something unique to the table, and it's through those differences that we can all learn and grow.
It's about coming to the table with humility, ready to listen and learn from each other.
That example about taking the time to learn about a younger person's interests, that really stuck with me.
It's a small gesture, but it shows you're making an effort to understand their world.
It's about building those bridges of understanding, recognizing that everyone has something valuable to offer.
And thinking about everything we've talked about today, it seems like respect is at the core of it all.
Respect, absolutely. Respect for ourselves, for others, and for the process of building those meaningful connections.
It's like the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Without that foundation, you're not going to get very far.
It's about appreciating each other's uniqueness, treating each other with kindness and understanding.
Creating a space where people feel safe to be themselves, to express themselves authentically.
And isn't that what it's all about? Creating those connections where we can truly be ourselves, where we feel seen and heard and appreciated for who we are.
I think that sums it up perfectly. It's been amazing diving deep into these ideas with you.
Me too. Who knew that something seemingly so simple could be so profound?
So, as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with this thought. What's one small step you can take this week to bring these ideas into your own life?
It's a great question. Remember, even the smallest actions can make a big difference.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep diving deep.